Star Wars has had hundreds of books over the years, spanning across multiple eras from before the prequels to during the prequels to the sequels and to the new Disney canon era, and we talk a lot about, especially on this channel, the best Star Wars books. I've done lists of my top 10 favorite Legends books, my top 10 favorite canon books, but I get a lot of questions on the channel asking me what are some of the most underrated Star Wars books. Today I'm going to be running down 10 of the books I think are the most underrated across both Legends and canon. And one of the things I do want to clarify is that underrated to me is very different than underread. I will be doing another list talking about the 10 most underread Star Wars books. So without further ado, let's get to the first book we're going to talk about today, and that is the Bantam era of Star Wars books, meaning the books that were released in the 90s, are a very mixed bag of books, and one of the few books that doesn't take place in the Bantam New Republic era but takes place around the original trilogy is the book that takes place almost immediately after Return of the Jedi, and that is The Truce at Bakura. Set just after Return of the Jedi, the Empire and the Rebellion find themselves united for a mission where they have to fight a new invading alien force. Sounds pretty familiar, especially when you compare it to something like New Jedi Order, but trust me, tonally and vibes-wise, this is completely different. First of all, this takes place literally right after Return of the Jedi, so you have the rebels dealing with the aftermath of the Battle of Endor, trying to regroup, and then now all of a sudden they find themselves tied with the Empire when the Empire sends out a distress beacon on Bakura, and they have to team up and fight these alien invaders called the Siruk. The Siruk are literally dinosaur-like alien creatures who can actually take the souls of humans and other species they consider to be subservient to them and use their life force and their energy to power all of their own technology. It deals with our main characters, Han, Luke, and Leia. Especially Luke is going through a lot. He's dealing with the redemption of his father, and now Leia has just found out in Return of the Jedi she's related to Luke, which now means she's related to Darth Vader. How is she processing all of that? So amidst this terrifying new threat, you also have these character moments for the three characters themselves. And I found a lot of what Kathy Tyers does here really compelling, as is a theme with a lot of these books. I wouldn't say this is one of the great Star Wars books of all time, but when it comes to especially these standalone stories in the Bantam era, this one often gets forgotten. Particularly when I was looking at Goodreads, I couldn't believe that The Truce at Bakura has a 3.46 out of 5, but then when you put it up against the rest of the Star Wars adults and young adult novels, it was ranked number 210. So it's absolutely one that if you're interested in kind of the early days of Star Wars, the post-Thrawn Star Wars, but the pre-prequels Star Wars, it's a really fascinating look at what the 90s were, especially when the EU was really starting to get going. For our second book we're going to talk about, let's bounce over to Star Wars canon. And this year I finally wrapped up reading every Star Wars canon novel. I don't know why it took me so long to get to this one, but I'm so glad I finally read it, and that is Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad. So just off the bat, I mean, a Battlefront tie-in book doesn't really sound that interesting, especially when Battlefront 2's story was kind of underwhelming. But Christie Golden's work here is really fascinating, especially when you look at 2025, because if you're somebody like me who really enjoyed Andor and thought it was fantastic, Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad does a lot to set up the Partisans and what the Partisans were like post Rogue One after Saw Gerrera's death when they became the Dreamers. The book, of course, follows Inferno Squad in their early days as they're being formed. This story is quite dark. It gets really disturbing at times, and the characters are really broken down. You get to meet pretty much every member of Inferno Squad that we see in the game, so it adds a lot to their story. Iden Versio is a character I never really cared much about in the game. I thought she was kind of bland in one note. Here, there are so many new sides to her. I found her quite fascinating. Del Meeko is also really, really good here. He's one of the standouts of the game, but here he's awesome as well. And there are a lot of twists and turns that connect the Partisans back to Saw's original Clone Wars days. And if you're somebody who's just looking for kind of a military vibe story, one with some spy espionage elements, I think you'll really enjoy Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad. Switching back over to Star Wars Legends now, I want to talk about Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor. Shadows of Mindor is Matthew Stover's homage to the original era of more sci-fi and kind of campy Star Wars stories. The book is once again set after Return of the Jedi, and Luke is dealing with becoming this icon. He's the one that slayed Darth Vader and defeated the Empire. He's kind of the poster boy of the early New Republic. So the book deals with the ideas of heroism and myth, and what does it mean to be this larger-than-life heroic figure, and how do you even live up to that? The main plot of the story does see Luke sent on a mission to defeat a new warlord called Shadow Spawn on the planet Mindor, but Shadow Spawn seems to have his own mystical abilities where he's able to control shadow and reality itself. Our heroes get caught in a surreal war involving mind control, illusion, and manipulation through the Force. It reads like a pulpy space sci-fi Star Wars story, but it does have all of Stover's signature character deconstruction and psychological depth underneath. Switching back over to Canon now, we're going to talk about an early Canon book, Tarkin by James Luceno. If you've seen all my other lists, you know James Luceno is one of my favorite Star Wars authors of all time. His writing is often slow burn. It has a lot of details, really packed with Star Wars lore. He's a Star Wars encyclopedia. But Tarkin might be his most simple and kind of straight to the point story, along with being one of his shortest Star Wars novels. But it came out in early canon. This was the second Star Wars canon book we ever got. This does so much for the character of Tarkin. On top of that, his connection with Palpatine, also the first book to introduce the name Sheev for Palpatine, his origins on Eriadu, his family's wild history, and the way they're born as hunters and put through these traumatic trials. It takes some wild swings, but it ultimately kind of pays off for a character that doesn't have that seminal origin story book in the Star Wars Expanded Universe continuity. Going back to Legends now, let's talk about Tattooing Ghost from 2003 by Troy Denning. Tattooing Ghost is the rare Leia-centric novel in Star Wars Legends, especially in standalone books. Leia doesn't necessarily get her due a lot. This one taking place right before the Thrawn trilogy starts. And Leia is still dealing with the fact that Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, was her father. And this book is an emotional journey that helps her come to grips with that reality. The story sees Han and Leia recover a vital rebel code hidden in a painting on Tatooine, where Leia slowly uncovers more about her father, Anakin Skywalker's past, as well as the legacy of her grandmother, Shmi Skywalker. Shmi is often not at the heart of a lot of Star Wars stories when it comes to the Skywalker lineage, and that's really a shame because of how much of an impact she has obviously on Anakin. It's really nice seeing her legacy defined on her grandchildren as well. It's intimate, it's heartfelt, and it gives Leia one of her best arcs in all of Star Wars Legends. Next up is one that's actually on my top 10 favorite Star Wars canon books, and that is Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, yes, once again by James Luceno. And this is another one that, especially in 2025, the year of Andor Season 2, Catalyst does a fantastic job being a complement piece to some of the stuff you see in Andor when it comes to Krennic, when it comes to Galen Erso, and the work they're doing together on the Death Star. This is a fantastic origin story for the Ersos. It makes them such compelling and tragic figures. When you see Lyra die at the beginning of Rogue One, there's a lot here that makes you genuinely sad when she goes. Same for Galen and ultimately his tortured friendship with Orson Krennic. If you're a Rogue One fan, if you're an Andor fan, if you're just kind of a fan of James Luceno in general, I think this is his best canon book. I think it's in his top 4 or 5 books for Star Wars ever. It's so fantastic. You should absolutely check it out. Let's go back to Star Wars Legends for one you might not immediately think of when you think of books, but I think absolutely deserves a little shout here, and that's The Force Unleashed. So if you ask a lot of Force Unleashed fans, Starkiller, those characters, the best way to experience the characters themselves is in the novelization by Sean Williams. Sean Williams does a fantastic job of grounding these otherworldly characters and really bringing them down to a level that it's not just consistent with the lore of Star Wars Legends, but also is more consistent and interesting for the characters themselves. Starkiller is a video game main character, so he's a power fantasy. He's got all the different powers. He can do anything when you're in the game. When you're fighting, he's beating Jedi Masters, he takes down Darth Vader, and some of that stuff obviously is part of the core of the Force Unleashed story, so it's still here. But the way Sean Williams crafts the story, he's much more of an enigma. You see a lot of things through the eyes of the character of Juno Eclipse, and by doing so, Williams creates this kind of tragic, mysterious figure that is hard to kind of track down as a person. And as you unfold those layers like Shrek with the onion,
layers! Onions have layers. Ogres have layers.
You get a character that's much more fully formed in the novel when the big things happen with the rebellion and with Vader at the end. If you're somebody who's always found The Force Unleashed a little bit distant, maybe not so much emotionally resonant, I urge you to give The Force Unleashed book a chance. Going back to canon for a second, the last canon book on this list, let's talk about Lords of the Sith. Paul S. Kemp is another author who came in to Star Wars at the end of Legends, writing the very underread Crosscurrent and Riptide. Lords of the Sith is one that was pretty widely read. I mean, look at this cover. It just screams Star Wars. But I personally feel as the years have gone on, as we've gotten further and further away from this book, and now this book is over 10 years old, you don't really hear people talking about this book anymore. It feels like it's now become underrated, where it used to be considered amongst the best canon books of all time. And I think that's a real shame, because this is not just a very cool book that has Palpatine and Vader doing very cool Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine things, but it has a great dynamic between the two. The antagonism, the master and apprentice relationship, looking at a master's manipulation of his apprentice, as well as the apprentice's own drive and hunger for power. And then on the flip side, Cham is such a big character in the Clone Wars as well as in Rebels. A lot of that early stuff with Cham and his group of rebels here is quite interesting if you're interested in Star Wars canon as well. And the last Legends book I want to talk about, and yes, James, once again, I'm giving you some credit, James Luceno, Cloak of Deception, I find incredibly underrated when it comes to the prequel conversation in Star Wars Legends. And I think a lot of times when it comes back to the reflection on Cloak of Deception, a lot of it has to do with just the general hate that was around the prequels, specifically politics within the prequels, and the way the prequels focus so much on political discussions and trade and all these different things from all these different factions. It was kind of everything that people hated about the Phantom Menace at the time, and has since become some of the things that prequel people like myself really love about the Phantom Menace. Cloak of Deception is one of the most politically rich Star Wars books we have ever seen. It shows exactly how the galaxy fell into its corrupted state that leads to the Clone Wars, and how Palpatine pulled the strings along the entire thing. And a character who's so central to galactic history, especially the history of the prequels, but barely gets any screen time and barely gets any other material anywhere else, is Chancellor Finis Valorum. This is a book kind of all about him and the push and pull between him and the rise of Palpatine. It's fascinating to look at how somebody who's considered like a good man in politics is dragged down into the muck as the dark, evil, sinister, manipulative Palpatine rises above him. It might not be the best book you read out of these 10 recommendations, but I think it's something that's really different and really interesting that you should absolutely check out. So James Luceno, third entry on my list. And the final canon book I wanted to finish with is another one that's often in that conversation for most underrated canon books, and that is Phasma by Delilah S. Dawson, tied into the Journey to the Last Jedi initiative. And I think all of us just being disappointed with The Force Awakens' depiction of Phasma. But then as the years went by, this book really picked up steam, and ultimately I read it, and I was really surprised, not just with the quality of the book, but also what the content of the book is. So Phasma is not just your typical origin story for a Star Wars character that doesn't have any story in the film. This is completely different. If you like Mad Max, you will like Phasma. Phasma is a brutal and primal story. It peels back Phasma's clean, shiny chrome armor to someone who's absolutely brutal and savage. She's a monster. You get really good world building for the First Order. You also get some new cool characters like Captain Cardinal and Vi Marati. It's a gripping, dark tale of a survivalist, somebody who you can see why she would do what she does in The Force Awakens. So if you're interested in the sequel era, Phasma is a book that not enough people have given a chance. So it's the final book here on my underrated Star Wars books list. But what do you think? Would you like to see 10 more underrated Star Wars books? I'm also going to be doing a list about the underread Star Wars books. Let me know in the comments which books you think are the most underrated. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hit that like button if you haven't. Subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you all next time.